How long has it been since you spread butter on your toast without a small wave of worry about your heart and your cholesterol? If you are over 60 and watching your numbers, I would guess it has been years. And I want to tell you something today that may genuinely change the way you look at the fat on your plate. The advice you were given that butter is poison for your heart and you must replace it with a tub of spread from the store is not the whole story. In many cases, the thing you switched to was worse for your cholesterol than the butter you gave up. That is not an opinion. It is what happens when you trade real food for a manufactured imitation. Here is something almost nobody tells you. For decades, millions of people were told to stop eating butter and start eating margarine made with partially hydrogenated oil. We now know those hydrogenated oils contain trans fats, and trans fats do something butter never did. They raise your bad cholesterol and lower your good cholesterol at the same time. The replacement was the danger. The difference between a butter that quietly works with your heart and one that works against it is sitting on the back of every package, waiting about 30 seconds for you to read it. Today, I am going to walk you through 5 specific types of butter that, chosen wisely and used in a sensible amount, can fit into an eating pattern that supports a healthier cholesterol profile after 60. And pay close attention to number 5. It is the cheapest of all. You can make it yourself at home in 2 minutes, and it carries the strongest evidence of the group for your cholesterol. But I am going to be honest with you the whole way through, the way I would be in my office, because you deserve that. Butter is still mostly saturated fat, and saturated fat can raise LDL cholesterol. So this video is not permission to eat butter by the spoonful. It is a guide to choosing a better butter using a smaller amount and understanding what truly matters for your heart. The honest goal here is a better fat in a smaller portion, not a free pass. Before I begin, do me a favor. Tell me in the comments how old you are and whether your last cholesterol check had you worried. I read every comment, and your answers help me understand who is sitting with me today. Your honesty about your own numbers helps more people than you know. Now, before I name a single type, I have to give you something that almost no article about butter and cholesterol ever bothers to explain clearly. Because if you skip this part, the 5 types will feel like a random list. Once you understand it, every single one will make sense. Here is the truth most people miss. With butter and your heart, 2 things matter far more than whether you eat butter at all. The first is the quality of the fat. The second is what you are replacing it with and how much you use. Let me give you the 3 ideas that hold this whole video together. The first is that not all fat behaves the same way in your body. Saturated fat, the kind butter is high in, can raise LDL, your bad cholesterol. Unsaturated fat, the kind in olive oil and in the fat of grass-fed animals, tends to improve your cholesterol balance. So a butter that carries more unsaturated fat, more omega-3, and more of a special fatty acid called CLA is a better butter for your heart than one that does not. Picture your bloodstream like a river. Saturated fat is heavy silt that can build up along the banks. Unsaturated fat flows more cleanly and even helps carry some of the silt away. The goal is to shift the balance, not to pretend fat does not matter. The second idea is vitamin K2. The same slow, traditional processes that make good butter, especially from grass-fed cows, leave behind vitamin K2, also called menaquinone. Think of K2 as a traffic controller for calcium. It directs calcium into your bones, where it belongs, and helps keep it out of the walls of your arteries, where it hardens into plaque. For a heart over 60, keeping calcium out of your artery walls is a quiet kind of protection that does not show up on a basic cholesterol panel but matters enormously. It is one of the reasons traditional, slowly made dairy fat behaves so differently in the body than a factory-made spread, even when the cholesterol numbers on the label look similar. The third idea, and the most important one of all, is what you replace butter with. This is where so many people went wrong for so many years. They gave up butter and switched to hard-stick margarine and hydrogenated vegetable spreads that were full of trans fat. Trans fat is the single worst kind of fat for your cholesterol. It raises your LDL and lowers your protective HDL at the same time, a double blow that saturated fat does not deliver. For many people, simply switching from a trans fat spread back to a sensible amount of real butter actually improved their cholesterol profile. The villain was never the butter dish on the table, it was the manufactured imitation that replaced it. That single fact has reshaped how doctors think about dietary fat over the last 2 decades. So when I rank these next 5 types, I am ranking them by how realistic they are to bring into your kitchen and how well the evidence supports them for your heart. Let me start with the gentlest upgrade. Number 1 is grass-fed butter. I put this first because it is the easiest upgrade in the world. It sits right there in the same dairy case. It spreads and tastes like the butter you already love, and switching to it asks nothing of you except reading a label. Here is what makes it different. Butter from cows that graze on grass has a meaningfully better fat profile than butter from grain-fed cows. One analysis found grass-fed butter provides around 26% more omega-3 fatty acids than regular butter. Other research found grass-fed dairy can carry up to 5 times more CLA, that beneficial fatty acid, than grain-fed dairy, and it is richer in vitamin K2, the calcium traffic controller I just described. You are eating the same food your body recognizes, but with a fat profile tilted in a friendlier direction. I want to be honest about the evidence here, because you deserve the truth. Grass-fed butter is still high in saturated fat, and the studies on CLA and cholesterol in humans are mixed, with some showing little change in LDL. So the benefit is real but modest, and it comes from the upgrade in quality, not from eating more. Use grass-fed butter in place of regular butter in the same small amount, and you have made a quiet improvement at no extra effort. Let me tell you about Margaret. She came to my office at 64, worried about a borderline cholesterol reading, certain that her morning pat of butter on toast was the culprit. We did not take away her toast or her butter. We switched her to grass-fed butter, kept the portion to a single teaspoon, and added a handful of walnuts and some oatmeal to her breakfast. At her next panel, her numbers had nudged in the right direction, and more importantly, she had stopped feeling afraid of her own breakfast. A practical portion of any butter on this list is about 1 teaspoon to 1 tablespoon a day, used with intention, not poured over everything. Now here is the label trap. Many butters use the words natural or farm fresh on the front and tell you nothing about the cows. You want the words grass-fed or pasture-raised right on the package. If it does not say grass-fed, assume it is conventional grain-fed butter. Number 2 is cultured butter, often sold as European-style butter. At first glance, this looks like fancier, more expensive regular butter. There is more to it than that. Cultured butter is made by fermenting the cream with live bacterial cultures before churning, the same idea as yogurt or good cheese. That fermentation does 2 helpful things. It develops beneficial compounds and reduces the amount of lactose, which makes cultured butter easier on the stomach for people who are sensitive to dairy. And European-style butter has a higher fat content and a richer flavor, which sounds like a drawback but is actually useful. A richer, more flavorful butter means a smaller amount satisfies you. You spread less and feel just as content, and a smaller portion of any butter is better for your cholesterol than a larger one. A practical portion of cultured butter is the same, around 1 teaspoon, where you let its deeper flavor do the work of a larger amount of bland butter. The label trap for cultured butter is the word cultured itself, or the phrase live cultures. Real cultured butter lists cream and cultures, sometimes salt. If it only says cream and there is no mention of cultures, it is regular sweet cream butter wearing a European-sounding name. Number 3 is ghee, also called clarified butter. This one deserves a place on the list for a specific reason, especially if you are sensitive to dairy. Ghee is butter that has been gently heated so the water evaporates and the milk solids, the proteins, and the milk sugars are removed and strained away. What is left is pure golden butterfat. Because the milk solids are gone, ghee contains virtually no lactose or casein, which makes it far easier on the system for people who react to dairy. It also carries butyrate, a short-chain fatty acid that calms inflammation in the gut. And because the milk solids that burn are removed, ghee handles high cooking heat without producing the harmful compounds that scorched butter can. For someone over 60 cooking at the stove, that stability matters. I will be honest here too. Ghee is essentially concentrated butterfat, so it is even higher in saturated fat per spoonful than regular butter. The lesson is the same as everywhere in this video. Ghee is a better choice for cooking and for sensitive stomachs, but it is not a license to use more. A little in place of less stable cooking fats is the wise way to use it. Quality and restraint together are the whole secret. A practical use of ghee is a small amount, around a teaspoon, for cooking eggs or vegetables at higher heat in place of the butter that would otherwise burn. The label trap for ghee is simple. The ingredient list should say one thing: clarified butter or butter. If you see added oils, flavorings, or preservatives, it has been adulterated. Pure ghee is just golden fat in a jar. Now, before I go on, let me ask you something personally. What did your last cholesterol panel actually say, your LDL and your HDL numbers? And has any doctor ever sat you down and explained the difference between the kind of fat in butter and the kind of fat in a hydrogenated spread? Tell me in the comments. I read every answer, and it helps me decide what to cover next on this channel. Number 4 is whipped butter. This is the one almost nobody thinks of, and it is one of the simplest tricks for your cholesterol on the entire list. Whipped butter is just real butter with air whipped into it. That is the whole secret. Here is why it helps. Because air takes up space that fat would otherwise occupy, a tablespoon of whipped butter contains less actual butter fat and therefore less saturated fat and fewer calories than a tablespoon of solid stick butter. You get the same buttery taste and the same satisfying spread, but every serving delivers less of the saturated fat that raises your LDL. It is portion control built right into the texture of the food, and it works without you having to think about it at all. You are not giving anything up. You are simply spreading more air and less fat without feeling deprived. Let me tell you about Robert. He came to me at 69, on a statin, with an LDL his cardiologist still wanted lower, and a deep refusal to give up butter on his morning bread. We did not fight about it. We switched him to whipped grass-fed butter and kept everything else the same. He spread it just as thickly as before, but he was eating noticeably less actual butter fat each morning without changing a single habit. Combined with a few other small changes, his next panel came back lower, and he never once felt like he was on a diet. The smallest change, the one that asks nothing of your willpower, is often the one you actually keep. A practical portion of whipped butter is a tablespoon spread as you like, knowing it carries less fat than the same spread of stick butter. The label trap for whipped butter is to make sure it is real butter and air, not a whipped vegetable oil spread. The ingredients should be cream and salt, simply whipped. If you see vegetable oils and a long list of additives, you are holding a processed spread, not whipped butter. And now we come to number 5. The one I told you to pay close attention to at the very start of this video, a simple homemade blend of butter and olive oil. It is the cheapest option of all because you make it yourself from things you already own. It takes 2 minutes, and it carries the strongest cholesterol evidence on this entire list because it is built on the one fat change that decades of research agree on. Here is the logic, and it is solid. The most consistent finding in all of cholesterol research is that replacing some saturated fat with unsaturated fat, especially the monounsaturated fat in olive oil, lowers LDL cholesterol. So instead of choosing between butter and olive oil, you combine them. You take softened real butter, best if it is grass-fed, and you whip or stir in an equal amount of extra virgin olive oil until it is smooth and spreadable. Now every spoonful you use carries half the saturated fat of straight butter, with the heart-friendly monounsaturated fat of olive oil taking its place. You keep the flavor of butter you love, and you cut its saturated fat burden in half, using a fat with genuine evidence behind it. Let me tell you about Dorothy. She came to me at 68, frustrated on a fixed income, certain that the heart-healthy spreads at the store were the only option, and that they cost more than she could justify. I told her she could make something better in her own kitchen for less. She softened a stick of grass-fed butter, stirred in an equal amount of olive oil, and kept it in a small dish in the refrigerator. She used it on everything she used to use butter on in the same amounts. 6 months later, with this swap and a bit more fiber in her diet, her LDL had come down and her doctor was pleased. This was not magic. This was the most reliable fat swap in nutrition science, made at her own counter for pennies. In practice, this blend is wonderfully easy. Soften 1 stick of good butter, whip in an equal amount of extra virgin olive oil, store it in a covered dish in the refrigerator, and use it exactly where you used butter before. It stays soft and spreadable straight from the cold, which is a small pleasure that hard butter never gave you. The label trap here does not even apply, because you control every ingredient. Just be sure your olive oil is real extra virgin olive oil, not a blend cut with cheap, refined oils, and that your butter is a quality grass-fed butter if you can manage it. Before I close this out, I want to spend a moment on the 3 things you should leave on the shelf, because knowing what to avoid matters just as much as knowing what to choose. And I want you to hear me clearly. If you switched to these years ago believing they were the heart-healthy choice, that was not your fault. You were told to by advice that has since changed. The first to avoid is hard-stick margarine and any spread made with partially hydrogenated oil. This is the original villain of this whole story. Partially hydrogenated oil contains trans fat, which raises your LDL and lowers your HDL at the same time, the worst combination for your heart. Many products have removed it, but cheaper spreads and shortenings can still carry it. The label trap is the phrase partially hydrogenated in the ingredient list. If you see those 2 words anywhere, put it back immediately. There is no safe amount. The second to avoid is ultra-processed vegetable oil spreads and butter sprays. These are the tubs and bottles promising to be lighter than butter, built from refined industrial oils, emulsifiers, artificial flavors, and a long list of additives to imitate the taste of the real thing. Replacing real butter with a manufactured imitation full of refined oils is not the upgrade the packaging promises. The label trap is the length of the ingredient list. Real butter has 1 or 2 ingredients. If a spread has 15, it is a factory product, not food your heart will thank you for. The third thing to leave behind is not a product at all. It is the habit of using too much of even the good butter. This is the honest caveat that holds the whole video together. Even grass-fed, cultured, beautiful butter is mostly saturated fat. Drowning your vegetables in it, frying everything in a thick layer of it, treating it as a free food because you heard butter was back, will work against your cholesterol no matter how good the butter is. The fix is not a label, it is a measuring spoon and a little intention. Now, before I send you off, I want to say the most important thing I will say all day, and it has nothing to do with any single butter. Have you ever forbidden yourself a food completely, only to find yourself overdoing it later and then quietly punishing yourself for it? If you nodded just now, please understand something. You are not weak. You are human, and your body responds to harsh restriction with rebound. People who feel guilt and deprivation around food tend to swing between strict denial and overeating. And that swing is harder on your health over the years than a calm, steady pattern of eating a small amount of real butter without shame. A teaspoon of good butter you enjoy and account for is far better for you than a week of resentful denial that ends in a stick of margarine on a stack of toast. Picture 2 patients in my clinic, both spreading a teaspoon of grass-fed butter on their morning bread. One of them understands she has chosen a better fat, kept the portion small, and built the rest of her plate around fiber and vegetables. She enjoys it and moves on. The other believes she is poisoning herself with every bite, feels guilty all day, and by evening has given up and eaten poorly out of frustration. Same teaspoon of butter, same body, completely different outcomes. The knowledge changed the experience, and the experience changed the behavior. That is what real, sustainable heart care looks like over years and decades. Not fear of a single food. Choose the better fat, keep the portion small, and pay attention to the whole plate and what you are replacing. So let me bring all of this back to where we started. Butter is not the enemy of your heart that you were told it was. The wrong fat, in the wrong amount, replacing the wrong things, is. And the difference is sitting on the back of every package, waiting about 30 seconds for you to read it. You now know the 5 forms worth choosing. Grass-fed butter, your easiest upgrade. Cultured European-style butter, fermented and so flavorful a little satisfies. Ghee, clarified and gentle for cooking and for sensitive stomachs. Whipped butter with portion control built into the air. And finally, a homemade butter and olive oil blend, the cheapest of all and the one with the strongest cholesterol evidence behind it. Here is what I want you to do, starting tonight. Open your refrigerator and find whatever you currently spread on your bread. Read the ingredient list. If you see the words partially hydrogenated, throw it out tonight. If you see a long list of refined oils and additives, set it aside. This week, pick up one real butter from this list, or simply make the olive oil blend yourself. Keep your portion to a teaspoon or so, used with intention, and build the rest of your plate around vegetables, fiber, and lean protein, because that whole pattern matters far more than any single fat. And at your next visit, ask your doctor a simple, kind question. Given my cholesterol numbers, what is the best fat for me to cook and spread with? That is a conversation worth having, especially if you take a statin or other heart medication. Now I want to hear from you. Of these 5 butters, which one surprised you the most, and which one are you going to try first this week? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one, and your answers shape what I cover next. And if you know someone over 60 who has spent years afraid of butter and confused about their cholesterol, send them this video. They deserve to know the truth, and one quiet change in their kitchen could matter at their next checkup. I am Dr. Angela Way. Years of sitting with patients across the same desk have taught me one thing more than any other. The right knowledge brings relief. The wrong knowledge breeds fear. I want you to walk away from this video feeling lighter, not guiltier. Everything I shared today is for your education, grounded in real evidence. But it does not replace the conversation you have with a doctor who knows your history and your numbers. Cholesterol is complex, the research on dietary fat continues to evolve, and what is right for one person is not right for another. Please never adjust or stop your cholesterol medication, whether it is a statin or anything else, based on something you watched online, including this video. Any change must go through the physician treating you. I hope this week brings you a calmer relationship with the food on your plate and a heart that keeps carrying you forward for many years. If today helped, subscribe so I can keep showing up for you each week with information you can actually trust. Take care of yourself. I will see you in the next one.